Capone, or Alphonse Gabriel Capone, also nicknamed as Scarface, was also here's a picture of him at the top with the cigar. He was born January 17, 1899 in Brooklyn, New York, where also I'm here right now in Brooklyn. He had Italian immigrant parents from Naples who came to America in 1893. His father was a barber and his mother was a seamstress. His father was named Gabriel Capone, also like Alphonse, and his mother Teresina Capone. All Alice, the fourth of 9 children. That's a pretty big family. They all grew up in Park Slope, and he attended school up until the 6th grade when he dropped out. He was always a good student until his attendance and performance started going bad. He started getting held back, and he got hit by one of his teachers. So he retaliated and ended up hitting her back, which he got sent to the principal's office for, where he got hit again too. Well, this occurred a lot back in the days of around the 1900s, and he never ended up going back to that school again, which caused him to join a bunch of gangs after that, also nicknamed the Fat Boy from Brooklyn. He met Johnny the Fox Torrio and Frankie Yale, who became kind of like his mentors, and got involved with a bunch of small gangs, and then later involved to the Manhattan-based 5 Points gang. He got the nickname Scarface actually working at a bar called the Harvard Inn in Coney Island. One night, a man named Frank Galluccio came in with his sister Lena and his date Maria Tazio for a drink. Al was wowed by Lena and hypnotized kind in a way and couldn't stop talking to her. At a point, he said something, and Frank wanted Al to apologize for it, which Al wouldn't. Drunk Frank cut Al's face with a knife, which caused the scar, but surprisingly, Al hated that name and would say the scars came from fighting in France. Personally, though, I'd actually kind of like the nickname. But in 1918, Al married a woman named May Josephine Colin at St. Mary's Star of the Sea Church here in Brooklyn, also in Carroll Gardens. And they had a child, Albert Francis Capone, and they also called him Sonny, who had a godfather, Johnny Torrio. Al in all, Al was one of the most famous American gangsters and leader of the Chicago Outfit during the Prohibition era. The Prohibition era was one of the nationwide constitutional bans on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages from the 1920s to 1933. But he was a crime boss, best known for his violence and ruthlessness to eliminate his enemies. After Capone arrived in Chicago, he started to work for a man named Torrio, who was part of a criminal network run by a man named Big Jim Colosimo. Colosimo, though, later ended up being killed, possibly by a hit ordered by Torrio and carried out by Al's former boss, Frankie Yale. So Torrio can take over and make Al one of his key aides. Then, like Big Jim Colosimo, Torrio got gunned down outside his Illinois home. He, however, did end up surviving, unlike Frankie. But he chose at that time 26-year-old Al Capone as his replacement, and he became the he called it a secret organization, the Outfit of America's, and he became one of America's leading mobsters. His gang managed to pull in around $100 million a year from bootlegging, mostly, then gambling, prostitution, racketeering, and other activities. He never apologized for how he made his living. He also claimed he was doing a public service, and quote-unquote would say, Sorry. Well, on February 14th, 1929, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, 7 men affiliated with George Bugs Moran gang got shot to death while lined up against the wall inside a garage in Chicago Lincoln Park neighborhood. The attackers consisted of at least 4 men, 2 of which dressed up as police officers. The rumor spread that while Capone, who was away at Florida at the time, was responsible for the attack on his Moran gang rival. The case, though, went unsolved. Later, Capone did get prosecuted, though, for tax evasion in 1931, and since that's what the government aimed to get in for. Even though he controlled the criminal empire and ordered hits on many enemies, he paid off police and public officials and threatening witnesses to clear his name. In May of 1929, though, he got arrested for carrying a concealed weapon in Philadelphia on his way back home to Chicago, following a summit of organized crime hunches in Atlantic City, and was sentenced to a year in prison. He got freed, though, in 1930, and later Chicago Commission released their first ever list of city's worst criminals. Capone named Public Enemy number 1. In June of 1931, he got indicted on charges of tax evasion and agreed to plead guilty, which the judge declined. Then, at the start of the proceedings, the judge also switched the jurors after finding out they had been bribed. In October of 1931, Al got charged guilty of 5 charges, 3 felonies and 2 misdemeanors, out of over 20 charges held against him. He got sentenced to 11 years behind bars and got fined $50,000, which was the harshest sentence delivered for tax fraud at that time. In May of 1932, though, he began his sentence at the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta. In August of 1934, he got transferred to the newly opened penitentiary on Alcatraz Island in San Francisco. When at Alcatraz, Capone started showing signs of illness, including dementia, after getting diagnosed for syphilis during his stay at the Atlanta penitentiary. As his condition worsened, prison doctors gave him malaria injections with the hope that the fevers caused by malaria would take away the syphilis. However, that caused the complete opposite effect and made him worse. In January of 1939, he was transferred to the Federal Correctional Institution at the Terminal Island to serve his 1-year misdemeanor sentence. Finally, he got released from prison in November of 1939 and went through several months of treatment for syphilis at the Baltimore Hospital. After that, he spent a lot of time away from the cameras, fishing, playing cards in the Palm Island, Florida, and this was his house. And this was also his wife and child on the bottom. After that, he became one of the first people to also receive penicillin shots for syphilis, but it was too late for him. In 1947, 48-year-old Capone suffered a stroke and then came down with pneumonia. After this, he died at his Florida home on January 25th.